The Galactic Empire had never known fear. It was a vast and ancient power that had spread its shadow across half the galaxy, conquering one star system after another. Planets burned, fleets surrendered, and entire civilizations fell silent under its rule. The Empire believed it was the final word in warfare, the peak of intelligence, and the masters of strategy. Their commanders never hesitated. Their soldiers never questioned. Their ships, sharp and silver like knives, moved through space with ruthless precision. Empires rose and fell, but the Galactic Empire remained, untouched and undefeated. So when scanners picked up signals from a small, unaligned planet at the edge of known space, called Earth, it was just another name to be added to their growing list of conquered worlds. The order was given without debate. A single fleet was sent, not because they expected a challenge, but because that was tradition. One fleet had always been enough. One strike, one victory, one more world bent to their will. But when that fleet entered human space, something strange happened. Contact was lost. At first, the Empire believed it was a malfunction. It had happened before in rough sectors. But as hours passed, then days, with no signal and no wreckage found, concerns started to rise. Still, it was not fear. It couldn't be. Not for the Empire. So they sent a second fleet, twice the size, armed with better weapons and stronger shields. Their mission: investigate and destroy anything that dared resist. As the second fleet approached the coordinates of the missing ships, they found debris. Sharp pieces of metal and shattered hulls floating in silence. The pieces didn't show signs of a large battle. There were no signs of heavy weapons or orbital strikes. It looked surgical, clean. Something had disabled the fleet, not with brute force, but with intelligence. Again, the Empire refused to panic. This was a new enemy, perhaps clever or lucky, but still untested. They sent a warning transmission to Earth, declaring their intent to invade. No reply came. Instead, a single human ship appeared near the outer edge of the Imperial formation. It wasn't like the Empire's sleek warships. It looked old, even damaged, with parts that didn't match. But it stood there, silent and alone. The Imperial commander ordered it scanned, but the results made no sense. It had weapons far too advanced for its size and technology that didn't fit any known pattern. Before anyone could act, a message played across all Imperial channels. A human voice, calm and steady, spoke only once. "You've never fought us before. Turn back." Then the ship vanished from scanners, as if it had never been there. That single moment changed everything. The Empire doubled its forces and began to prepare for a full assault. Thousands of ships were gathered, ready to bring Earth to its knees. But the humans didn't wait. They struck first, and they didn't strike the way the Empire expected. Human attacks were fast, silent, and invisible. Small teams would appear deep inside supply bases, sabotage systems, and disappear. Communications began to fail. Supply lines went dark. Ships started vanishing from patrol routes without a trace. Every time the Empire thought it had the humans cornered, they would change tactics. They never fought the same way twice. Their strategies weren't based on strength, but creativity. They used their weaknesses as weapons and turned every loss into a lesson. Human soldiers fought like they had something more than orders, like they had a reason. And slowly the Empire began to understand that this enemy was different. They didn't fight for land or power. They fought for survival, and that made them unstoppable. The Empire's leaders gathered to make sense of what was happening. Their history had no record of a species like this. Humans adapted faster than any other enemy they had faced. They used guerrilla tactics, electronic warfare, hacking, infiltration, and psychological operations. Entire planets were lost not because of battles, but because the humans convinced the locals to rise up. Fear spread in the ranks of the Empire, something no commander had felt before. Soldiers began to question missions. Some refused to go into human space. Others reported seeing strange, silent human ships appear and vanish without firing a single shot. Rumors spread of human soldiers walking through walls, reading minds, or surviving impossible wounds. The truth was simpler, but far more dangerous. Humans were not magical. They were determined. Their technology was not always better, but they knew how to use it well. And when a human fell in battle, 5 more took their place, smarter and better prepared. The Empire wasn't just fighting a species. It was fighting a mindset, a spirit that didn't break under pressure but became sharper with every strike. Then came the day when human ships appeared near the Empire's inner worlds. No one had expected them to reach so deep, so fast. The ships were not part of a massive fleet. They were small, quiet, and precise. They didn't attack cities. They took out communication centers, shut down defense grids, and left messages behind. Messages written in the Empire's own language, broadcast to every citizen, every soldier, every leader. This war wasn't our choice. We warned you, but you didn't listen. Panic broke out across the Empire. Colonies began declaring independence. Military leaders went silent. Fleet commanders turned on each other in desperation. The humans had not only won the war, they had taken apart the very structure of the Empire itself. One by one, systems collapsed, not with explosions, but with silence. The silence of empty command centers, dark space stations, and broken chains of command. In the end, the Emperor stood alone, watching as the last reports came in. He asked the question that had haunted them from the beginning. Who are these humans? But there was no one left to answer. All that remained was a final message from the humans, played across every frequency the Empire still controlled. It was not a threat. It was a truth, spoken plainly and without hate. We don't enjoy war, but we will not be conquered. We are human. And if you ever face us again, remember this: your only chance is to run. Then the message ended, and with it, the story of an empire that had never known fear until it met Earth. The Galactic Empire had explored the stars for thousands of years, discovering new species, crushing resistance, and spreading its rule across countless systems without ever facing real danger. Every new world was just another flag on their map, another culture forced into silence, another lesson for the galaxy about who ruled the stars. The Empire's ships were faster, their weapons stronger, and their strategies flawless, or so they believed. So when a scout fleet detected unknown signals from a small blue planet orbiting a yellow sun, they didn't hesitate. It was routine, nothing more. The planet was called Earth, and its people were called humans. They hadn't joined the galactic community, hadn't sent ambassadors, and hadn't answered the Empire's automated hails. That silence was taken as disrespect. The Empire decided it was time for first contact. A diplomatic vessel, escorted by a light defense team, was sent with standard protocols. Demand surrender, offer guidance under Empire rule, and if refused, call for reinforcements. They expected confusion, perhaps a little fear. But what they got was something they had never seen before. As the Imperial ship entered orbit, they found human satellites scanning them. Within minutes, Earth launched a global alert. Dozens of military satellites focused on the ship. Radar systems, communication intercepts, and laser targeting locked in, as if humans had been preparing for this moment all their lives. The commander was surprised, but not worried. He opened a channel and spoke in translated language. "We bring you civilization. Submit and survive." There was no answer at first, just silence. Then came a short, sharp message. "Leave now. This is your only chance." The words made no sense to the commander. The humans were clearly outmatched. They had primitive weapons, no interstellar travel, and were limited to their home planet. He repeated the message, louder, with threats included. Within seconds, a beam of focused energy fired from a satellite. It didn't damage the ship but disrupted its systems for a moment, long enough to show it wasn't a bluff. The humans had just fired a warning shot. It wasn't random. It was precise. That was the Empire's first mistake. They believed humans didn't understand war. Instead of retreating, the Empire responded with force. Fighters were launched, circling Earth's orbit to show dominance. But before they could complete their sweep, 3 of them vanished from radar. The cause was unknown. They simply disappeared. Confused, the commander ordered them recalled, but only one returned, heavily damaged and without its pilot. Black box data showed nothing, just static. Then, human aircraft began to appear, not from space, but from the ground. Fighter jets, fast and agile, moved into the sky. Satellites beamed coordination signals. Earth's defenses activated in full force, not out of panic but with precision. It wasn't a panic response. It was a plan. The humans had prepared for this, not just with weapons, but with data, simulations, and strategy. For years, they had imagined. The Empire still didn't take it seriously. They assumed it was luck. 1 victory, maybe 2. They didn't understand what humans were. They didn't understand how quickly they learned. Within hours, the humans had hacked the Empire's transmission signals, listening in on their commands, predicting their moves, and responding before orders could even be completed. The Empire tried to land ground forces, but each drop site was met with resistance. Not massive armies, but small, mobile human teams with knowledge of the terrain, advanced camouflage, and weapons modified specifically to pierce Imperial armor. Human soldiers moved like ghosts, striking and vanishing, leaving behind wreckage and confusion. The Empire lost squads without even firing a shot. It was as if the humans had been fighting them for years already. And maybe, in a way, they had. Through fiction, through simulations, through preparation, humanity had imagined every possible kind of alien invasion. Now they were applying all that knowledge with terrifying effectiveness. Desperate to recover control, the Empire sent reinforcements, larger ships with heavier weapons. But by then, the humans had already adapted. They had studied the captured technology, reverse-engineered basic defenses, and begun launching high-powered electromagnetic pulses that fried Imperial electronics. Cities across Earth united in ways the Empire had never seen before. Former enemies standing side by side, sharing resources, planning attacks. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't divided. They had found a common enemy, and they didn't wait for orders from world leaders. Civilian scientists, rogue hackers, underground fighters, all became part of the resistance. It wasn't an army. It was a species fighting for survival. And the Empire, built on structure and command, didn't know how to fight chaos. One by one, Imperial bases were overrun. The humans didn't just win. They humiliated them. They sent messages back with captured helmets, shutdown codes, and recordings of their own soldiers surrendering. The Galactic Council, watching from afar, was stunned. The Empire had never been pushed back before, let alone embarrassed. Whispers began in other systems. If the humans could fight back, maybe others could too. The Empire tried to cover it up, but it was too late. The humans had become a symbol of defiance. Their message was clear. We didn't start this, but we'll finish it. The Empire made one final push, a massive invasion fleet, enough to crush 100 worlds. But when it entered Earth's space, it didn't find resistance in the sky. It found empty silence. The fleet slowed, confused. Then, human ships emerged from the darkness. They were stolen Empire vessels, reprogrammed and armed with new tech. They struck fast and hard, disabling engines, breaching hulls, and scattering formations. On Earth, ground teams launched coordinated cyber attacks, shutting down the fleet's command systems. The entire invasion fell apart in under an hour. In the end, the first contact wasn't a conversation. It wasn't peace. It was a mistake the Empire would never forget. The humans didn't beg for mercy. They didn't seek glory. They only sent one final message, short and cold. This was your warning. The Empire retreated, not because they were defeated in battle, but because they were defeated in mind, in spirit, in strategy. They had underestimated a species that thrived on pressure, that learned from pain, and that refused to be controlled. First contact should have been peaceful. It could have been an alliance, a new future. But the Empire made the wrong move. And now, across the galaxy, their defeat echoed like thunder. The message was clear for anyone listening. Humanity was not to be conquered. Humanity was to be feared. After the Empire's humiliating retreat from Earth, whispers of human resistance echoed across the galaxy, spreading faster than any fleet could travel. Species who had bowed to the Empire for generations now paused and listened, wondering what kind of creatures could defeat such a mighty force. The Empire, desperate to erase its shame, regrouped and began planning a second invasion, one that would leave no room for error. But deep beneath the surface of Earth, in hidden bunkers and high-tech labs, humanity had already begun its next move, not with more weapons, but with ideas. The true strength of humanity was never in its firepower. It was in its ability to think differently. They didn't fight like anyone else. They didn't follow patterns. Every loss became a lesson, every weakness a spark for innovation. Unlike the Empire, which relied on rigid strategy and overwhelming numbers, humans adapted like water, shifting, bending, and breaking through cracks until they found a way in. And now, they were preparing a strategy not just to defend Earth, but to change the rules of war entirely. The Empire thought in terms of battleships, orbital bombardments, and planetary sieges. Humanity thought in terms of confusion, disruption, and infiltration. While the Empire expected resistance at the borders, human operatives had already slipped through the cracks, using salvaged alien tech and improvised stealth methods to sneak into enemy systems. They didn't aim to destroy planets. They aimed to destroy belief. One by one, they began targeting key nodes in the Empire's control structure: communication hubs, supply routes, and command centers. But instead of destroying them, they did something worse. They manipulated them. Messages were altered, supply deliveries were routed, orders reversed. Entire garrisons began moving in circles, hunting enemies that didn't exist. Paranoia spread like a virus. Imperial commanders began questioning their own systems, fearing betrayal from within. And all the while, the humans remained ghosts, unseen, unheard, unstoppable. Their goal wasn't to fight the war the Empire expected. It was to make the Empire fight itself. But humanity's strategy wasn't just based on intelligence and stealth. It was psychological. They knew the Empire had ruled through fear, crushing resistance with swift and brutal examples. So humanity flipped the game. Instead of fear, they spread hope. Covert broadcasts from Earth reached oppressed planets, reminding them that the Empire could be beaten. Short videos showed captured ships, disabled fleets, and human soldiers walking freely through ruins of Imperial bases. But they didn't boast. They inspired. If we can do it, so can you, the message said. Rebellions began to rise. Not coordinated armies, but sparks of chaos. Minor uprisings, sabotage acts, disappearing patrols. The Empire, for the first time in history, couldn't keep up. Their fear was no longer a weapon. It was now a weakness. The more they cracked down, the more systems slipped away. They tried blaming each other, hunting spies, purging ranks. But the damage had already been done by a species that was never supposed to be a threat. On Earth, leaders didn't sit in thrones or command from distant towers. The Human War Council was made of scientists, soldiers, hackers, and strategists. People who once worked in basements or backrooms, now shaping galactic history. They held no single plan. Every situation was met with multiple responses, allowing teams to improvise, adjust, and strike in ways the Empire couldn't predict. Humans used outdated tech in clever ways, turning what the Empire considered junk into deadly tools. Old satellites became signal jammers. Decommissioned ships were rebuilt into traps. Even human culture, movies, games, stories, was weaponized. The Empire, trying to study human behavior, became overwhelmed by fiction and imagination, unable to separate truth from trick. They wasted months chasing fake fleets or preparing for attacks that existed only in Earth's movies. By the time they realized, the real attack had already happened somewhere else. But perhaps the most brilliant part of the human strategy was patience. They didn't rush for victory. They didn't crave conquest. They knew the empire would collapse under its own weight if pushed at the right points. And so they watched, they waited, and they struck only when it would hurt the most. They didn't need to invade every world. They only needed to make the empire believe that no world was safe. That belief, once broken, spread faster than any weapon. The empire tried to isolate Earth, cutting off travel and communication, but it was already too late. Humanity had learned the galaxy's systems, languages, and protocols. They were now inside the machine. And once inside, they didn't act like soldiers. They acted like viruses, rewriting everything from within. AI systems began malfunctioning. Navigation networks failed. Ships turned against their owners. No one knew who to trust. Every light in the sky became a threat. And through it all, the humans never stopped adapting. At the heart of this chaos stood a new kind of warrior, not just a fighter, but a thinker, someone who could outsmart machines, outfight aliens, and outblast pressure. These were humans trained not just in battle, but in resilience, strategy, and creativity. One such operative, known only as Cade, led missions into the Empire's core worlds, gathering secrets, disrupting control, and leaving behind symbols of rebellion. He became a myth among Imperial soldiers, a ghost who never missed, never fell, never stopped. But he wasn't alone. Dozens like him moved through the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as reminders. They didn't want territory. They wanted the Empire to understand. This war was not about strength. It was about survival, intelligence, and the will to never kneel. The humans had nothing at the start. No allies, no fleets, no advanced tech. But now, they had fear on their side. The same fear the Empire once used had turned back on them, sharper and more precise than any blade. In the end, the human strategy wasn't just about beating the Empire. It was about changing the rules. They refused to play the same old game. They invented their own. And by the time the Empire realized it, the board had already flipped. Worlds that once trembled under the Empire's banner now raised Earth's signal in secret, waiting for the day humanity would arrive. Not as rulers, but as the spark of rebellion. The galaxy had watched Earth stand alone. Now it was ready to stand with them. And the Empire, once unstoppable, now found itself surrounded by enemies it couldn't see, fighting battles it couldn't win, and haunted by a question it never thought it would ask. What if we were wrong? What if, in our pride, our arrogance, our cruelty, we picked a fight with the one species we should have feared from the very beginning? That was the true human strategy, not to win the war with force, but to make the enemy regret starting it. In the dark corners of the galaxy, where stars flickered like dying candles and ancient machines floated silent through space, rumors began to spread of a new kind of threat, something no scanner could detect, no sensor could track, and no warrior could fight. The Galactic Empire, after centuries of ruling through technology and force, had never prepared for an enemy it couldn't see. After their first disastrous encounter with humans, they thought they had learned everything. About Earth, about human weapons, about their strange resistance. But what they didn't understand was that the most dangerous human weapon wasn't their machines or ships. It was something hidden, silent, and growing stronger with every passing day. The Empire sent spy drones to observe human movements, tried to break into their networks, and captured prisoners for interrogation, but none of it brought answers. Every time they thought they were ahead, the humans were already 10 steps further. Worlds would fall without warning. Systems would collapse without cause, and entire fleets would vanish without a trace. The generals blamed faulty intelligence, the admirals blamed bad luck, but those closer to the front whispered of something far worse. A weapon that couldn't be stopped because it didn't fire missiles or lasers. It fired doubt, fear, and chaos straight into the minds of the enemy. It began with simple things. Communication blackouts between Empire sectors that should have been impossible. Entire command bases waking up to find their systems reprogrammed. Supply ships arriving full of the wrong cargo, with coordinates changed mid-flight. These weren't random mistakes. They were signs of something deliberate. At first, the Empire believed they were being hacked. Their best programmers launched security sweeps, replaced systems, rebuilt firewalls. But it didn't stop. The interference was too adaptive, too creative. One Imperial technician described it like fighting against a ghost that kept changing shape. What they didn't know was that the ghost had a name. Project Mirage. A human initiative that had taken an unexpected path when a team of scientists realized they didn't need to destroy the Empire's machines to win. They only had to confuse them. Instead of focusing on building bigger weapons, they created something entirely new. Artificial minds that learn to mimic enemy systems, study their behavior, and then feed them lies so subtle and clever that even the smartest AI couldn't tell what was real. These programs didn't just attack computers, they attacked trust. Once inside, they'd alter maps, shift schedules, change passwords by a single character, and wait for panic to spread. But Project Mirage was only part of the story. The real strength of the unseen weapon wasn't in code, it was in the minds of the humans who had learned to think beyond the battlefield. While the Empire kept focusing on technology, humans used psychology. They planted false stories, rumors, fake messages from high command. In one case, an entire fleet was ordered to stand down because they believed they received a message from the Emperor himself. That message was crafted by a young human linguist who studied Imperial dialects and tone patterns so perfectly that even their highest-ranking officers didn't question it. By the time the mistake was discovered, the human forces had already moved past them. The Empire, determined. Their technology was not always better, but they knew how to use it well. And when a human fell in battle, 5 more took their place, smarter and better prepared. The Empire wasn't just fighting a species. It was fighting a mindset, a spirit that didn't break under pressure but became sharper with every strike. Then came the day when human ships appeared near the Empire's inner worlds. No one had expected them to reach so deep, so fast. The ships were not part of a massive fleet. They were small, quiet, and precise. They didn't attack cities. They took out communication centers, shut down defense grids, and left messages behind. Messages written in the Empire's own language, broadcast to every citizen, every soldier, every leader. This war wasn't our choice. We warned you, but you didn't listen. Panic broke out across the Empire. Colonies began declaring independence. Military leaders went silent. Fleet commanders turned on each other in desperation. The humans had not only won the war, they had taken apart the very structure of the Empire itself. One by one, systems collapsed. Not with explosions, but with silence. The silence of empty command centers, dark space stations, and broken chains of command. In the end, the Emperor stood alone, watching as the last reports came in. He asked the question that had haunted them from the beginning. Who are these humans? But there was no one left to answer. All that remained was a final message from the humans, played across every frequency the Empire still controlled. It was not a threat. It was a truth, spoken plainly and without hate. We don't enjoy war, but we will not be conquered. We are human. And if you ever face us again, remember this: your only chance is to run. Then the message ended, and with it, the story of an empire that had never known fear until it met Earth. The Galactic Empire had explored the stars for thousands of years, discovering new species, crushing resistance, and spreading its rule across countless systems without ever facing real danger. Every new world was just another flag on their map, another culture forced into silence, another lesson for the galaxy about who ruled the stars. The Empire's ships were faster, their weapons stronger, and their strategies flawless, or so they believed. So when a scout fleet detected unknown signals from a small blue planet orbiting a yellow sun, they didn't hesitate. It was routine, nothing more. The planet was called Earth, and its people were called humans. They hadn't joined the galactic community, hadn't sent ambassadors, and hadn't answered the Empire's automated hails. That silence was taken as disrespect. The Empire decided it was time for first contact. A diplomatic vessel, escorted by a light defense team, was sent with standard protocols. Demand surrender, offer guidance under Empire rule, and if refused, call for reinforcements. They expected confusion, perhaps a little fear. But what they got was something they had never seen before. As the Imperial ship entered orbit, they found human satellites scanning them. Within minutes, Earth launched a global alert. Dozens of military satellites focused on the ship, radar systems, communication intercepts, and laser targeting locked in, as if humans had been preparing for this moment all their lives. The commander was surprised, but not worried. He opened a channel and spoke in translated language. "We bring you civilization. Submit and survive." There was no answer at first, just silence. Then came a short, sharp message. "Leave now. This is your only chance." The words made no sense to the commander. The humans were clearly outmatched. They had primitive weapons, no interstellar travel, and were limited to their home planet. He repeated the message, louder, with threats included. Within seconds, a beam of focused energy fired from a satellite. It didn't damage the ship but disrupted its systems for a moment, long enough to show it wasn't a bluff. The humans had just fired a warning shot. It wasn't random. It was precise. That was the Empire's first mistake. They believed humans didn't understand war. Instead of retreating, the Empire responded with force. Fighters were launched, circling Earth's orbit to show dominance. But before they could complete their sweep, 3 of them vanished from radar. The cause was unknown. They simply disappeared. Confused, the commander ordered them recalled, but only one returned, heavily damaged and without its pilot. Black box data showed nothing, just static. Then, human aircraft began to appear, not from space, but from the ground. Fighter jets, fast and agile, moved into the sky. Satellites beamed coordination signals. Earth's defenses activated in full force, not out of panic but with precision. It wasn't a panic response. It was a plan. The humans had prepared for this, not just with weapons, but with data, simulations, and strategy. For years, they had imagined, on one cold and silent planet near the edge of the Empire's territory, a secret listening post received a strange signal. It was just a soft melody, an old human lullaby, repeated over and over. The commander ordered it shut down, but the tune kept coming back, louder each time. Some crew members began hearing it in their dreams. Others reported seeing things that weren't there, flashes of Earth, voices in languages they didn't understand. The post eventually went silent. When Imperial forces arrived, they found no bodies, no signs of struggle, just that haunting melody playing on loop. The official report called it a systems failure, but those who read between the lines knew better. The unseen weapon was no longer just in their systems. It had started to invade their minds. The Empire, proud and powerful, had created soldiers who followed orders without question. But humans had evolved differently. They encouraged questions, embraced uncertainty, and turned mistakes into strength. This mindset became their greatest weapon. Where Imperial thinking was rigid, human thought was flexible. Where the Empire demanded order, humans thrived in chaos. And now that chaos had a name and a method. Deep inside the Empire's capital, far from any battlefield, strange things began to happen. Emergency drills were triggered in the middle of the night without cause. Security doors would lock or unlock at random. And every few days, someone would find a short sentence scratched into a wall, a desk, or a screen. "We're already here." The Empire's leaders began to panic. They tightened control, silenced news, arrested those who questioned too much. But the damage had been done. The fear was growing. And fear, once planted, grows faster than any weapon. The humans didn't need to win every battle. They just needed the Empire to believe they were losing. The strategy was slow, patient, and merciless. The Empire, designed to crush open rebellion, was helpless against silent sabotage. Entire campaigns would stall because a single piece of information was missing or wrong. And when the Imperial fleets finally tried to counterattack Earth, they found themselves navigating a maze of traps, fake signals, and phantom fleets. Every move predicted, every plan broken before it began. The unseen weapon had no shape, no sound, no single point of origin. It was built from the human ability to think differently, to fight a war where battles were won before they began. It lived in code, in whispers, in hesitation. The Empire, for all its ships and soldiers, was slowly crumbling under the weight of its own fear. And as more systems fell silent, as more planets began to question the rule of the Empire, one message began to appear across hacked screens and open channels, written in simple human language, always in the same cold, calm words. "This is not a war. This is a correction." The galaxy watched as the once invincible Empire began to tear itself apart, not because of a giant army or a planet-killing weapon, but because of the quiet force of doubt, spread by a species the Empire had once called weak. But now, they knew better. Humans were not weak. They were something far more dangerous. They were invisible. They were patient. And they had just begun. In the far reaches of a dying galaxy, where stars flickered like memories and silence ruled between the ruins of empires, a single voice echoed through the void, calm, defiant, and entirely human. The galactic empire was collapsing, not from invasion or weapons, but from fear, doubt, and silence. And now only one final transmission remained, one last broadcast meant to reach whoever was still listening. It came from a hidden human ship drifting quietly near the shattered remains of the Orion Gate, a place once full of trade and life, now just burnt wreckage floating in space. The broadcast was not flashy, not filled with warnings or threats. It was a simple message from a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to say. Commander Elias Grant sat alone in the dark, surrounded by broken systems, flickering monitors, and the dying hum of a ship too damaged to ever fly again. He knew there was no rescue, no backup, and no future, but that didn't stop him from speaking. His voice, though tired, carried strength as it traveled across old beacons and abandoned channels, slipping past broken satellites and shattered relay stations. Somewhere, someone would hear it, and that was enough. He spoke not just for Earth, but for every species that had been silenced by the Empire, every world burned, and every voice erased. He told the story of what the Empire tried to do, how they saw humanity as a mistake, an unpredictable species that refused to kneel. He spoke of first contact, of betrayal, of how humans were hunted not because they were dangerous, but because they could not be controlled. He remembered the early days of the war, when hope still burned and fleets still. Last words from outposts overrun by enemy machines, and the quiet sobs of soldiers who realized too late that no one was coming to save them. He spoke of sacrifice, not as a symbol, but as reality. How people gave their lives to protect a single signal tower, to delay a single enemy scout, to send a single warning before vanishing into fire and darkness. The Empire thought they had silenced Earth when they destroyed the Sol relay, but they didn't understand humans. They never understood that humans don't fight for empires or flags. They fight for each other, for the stubborn idea that truth matters, and for the belief that even in darkness, someone must speak. As Elias spoke, a flicker of emotion passed through his voice, not sadness, but something deeper, defiance. He revealed things the Empire tried to bury, secret victories that never made it into records, and names of heroes erased from history. He told the galaxy how a single scout ship lured an entire fleet into a neutron storm, sacrificing itself to buy time for 3 refugee transports to escape. He shared how a group of engineers turned a broken mining colony into a fortress that held for 3 years, even as the Empire surrounded them. Every story he shared was a weapon, sharper than blades, louder than guns, because they reminded everyone that the Empire could not destroy the human spirit. The broadcast was more than a message. It was a challenge to those still living. Elias asked no one to fight, made no demands for revenge, but simply laid out the truth and let the silence speak after each word. Somewhere out there, resistance still lived in shadows, in whispers, in signals hidden deep within static. And maybe, just maybe, they would hear this voice and remember they were not alone. He ended the message with a truth the Empire feared more than any weapon. You cannot rule minds that refuse to forget. Then the screen faded. The audio fell quiet, and the stars once again took back the silence. But the signal didn't stop there. It bounced from station to station, from forgotten buoy to damaged probe, slipping through cracks in the Empire's surveillance like water through shattered glass. Days later, a small group of scavengers on a dead moon picked up the signal and replayed it. They didn't say a word afterward, just packed their things and left, not for home, but toward the old human sectors. On a prison world deep in the Empire's core, a technician played the message through a smuggled earpiece, then passed it to another prisoner and another, until the words had reached every cell. In hidden bunkers, rogue AI and exiled scientists replayed the broadcast and began working again, not for survival, but for something more. The Empire, powerful and vast, didn't even notice the message at first. But as small rebellions reignited, as encrypted messages appeared on forgotten networks, as resistance cells began to speak the name Elias Grant, they realized too late what had happened. It wasn't an army or a weapon that struck them. It was a voice, a single voice carried by those who refused to forget. The final broadcast had become something far more than Elias ever expected. It had become a memory the Empire could not erase, a truth they could not kill. And far beyond the reach of any ship or empire, deep in the endless stars, his voice still traveled, strong, clear, and waiting for the right ears to hear.